A pregnant woman was being erased by paperwork before anyone even touched her. In a frozen lake town, they called it protection, but it was really control. Ilara knew they wanted her silence, her signature, and the child she was carrying. A former Navy SEAL tried to stay out of trouble until his German Shepherd refused to move. One hidden file, one false diagnosis, and one loyal dog would expose a man everyone trusted. But when the legal help came knocking, her baby's life was already running out of time. Tell us where you're watching from, share your feelings after the story, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep writing more powerful stories. White Hollow Lake looked peaceful to strangers. That was the trick of the place. In winter, the lake froze wide and pale beneath the northern sky, a sheet of white glass stretching between dark pine forests and low wooden houses with smoking chimneys. On clear mornings, the light bounced off the ice so fiercely that people had to narrow their eyes just across the street. It made everything look clean, innocent, almost blessed. But Ilara Quinn had lived there long enough to know that cold light did not forgive anything. It only revealed what stood still long enough to be seen. Ilara was 28, 7 months pregnant, and tired in the quiet way people became tired when life had stopped asking permission before taking from them. She was not tall, about 5'6", with a slim frame that had once moved quickly through rooms before pregnancy slowed her steps and sharpened the curve of her belly beneath her clothes. Her face was oval and fine-boned, pale from long shifts and poor sleep. Dark brown hair, usually tied low at the nape of her neck, often loosened by noon so that small strands framed her cheeks. Her eyes were blue-gray, watchful rather than shy, the kind of eyes that had learned to measure a room before trusting it. She worked at Frostbite Diner, a narrow little place on Lake Road with red vinyl stools, fogged windows, old coffee pots, and a bell above the door that rang with the same tired cheer whether someone came in hungry or cruel. Outside, freezing rain tapped against the windows. It should have been snow. Everyone said that. January rain made people uneasy in White Hollow Lake. Rain did not belong on top of hard ice and old snow. It fell in silver needles, darkening the road, striking the frozen lake beyond the diner, and making tiny sounds that resembled cracking bones. Ilara tried not to listen. She carried 2 plates of eggs and sausage to booth 4, one hand steady beneath the plates, the other unconsciously resting against the side of her belly. The baby shifted low and slow, a private movement beneath all the public noise. "You're getting slower every week," muttered Mr. Dane at the counter. He was not a bad man in any dramatic way. That almost made it worse. He was simply one of those men who believed age had earned him the right to turn every thought into weather. 70 or so, narrow shoulders, white stubble, red-veined nose, a cap pulled low over a bald head, always smelling faintly of pipe smoke, though no one had seen him smoke in years. Ilara set the plates down without answering. Another man at the end of the counter chuckled. "She's carrying extra cargo, Dane. Give her a break." The kindness was fake enough to sting. Ilara had learned that some insults came wrapped as jokes because cowards like to leave themselves exits. From behind the register, Mabel Crane looked up. Mabel owned Frostbite Diner and had for nearly 30 years. She was 67, short and sturdy, with silver-white hair twisted into a low bun and a round, lined face that could seem hard until one noticed how often her pale blue eyes missed nothing. She wore a thick brown sweater beneath a dark checked apron, black work pants, and old non-slip shoes polished by years of crossing the same floor. Mabel spoke little when feelings were involved. She believed soup, coffee, and silence solved more problems than most sermons. But lately she had been watching Ilara too often. Not warmly, not coldly either. As if Ilara had become a door Mabel was afraid to open. "You need to sit after the lunch rush," Mabel said. Ilara glanced at her. "I'm fine." That wasn't a question. The words were sharp, but something beneath them was not. Ilara nodded and returned to the counter, where a stack of unpaid invoices sat beneath the register clip. She should not have looked at them, but the top page had her name on it, not handwritten, printed, Elara Quinn, receiving confirmation. Her fingers paused. The invoice was for kitchen equipment repairs, dated 2 weeks earlier. $380. North Vale Maintenance Group, initialed at the bottom with a looping EQ. Elara had not received anything. She had not confirmed anything. She certainly had not signed. Her pulse moved oddly, like a bird trapped behind her ribs. "You forgetting how to read, Ellie?" The voice came from booth 2. Russ Cafferty sat there with one thick arm stretched along the back of the seat, grinning like he had found something soft to press his thumb into. He was around 40, broad in a heavy way rather than a strong one, with a rough jaw shaded by dark stubble, muddy brown eyes, and short hair flattened by a winter cap. His work jacket was black and stained near the cuffs. He came in 3 times a week, paid in cash, and always seemed to know which days Elara was working before he opened the door. Elara slipped the invoice beneath another sheet. "No," she said quietly. "Just checking totals." Russ's grin widened. "Careful. Numbers can get tricky when you're emotional." A few people laughed, not loudly. That would have required courage. Elara looked down at the counter. She could feel heat rising in her face, shame first, then anger at the shame. She hated that part most. Not the insult, but how quickly her body still believed humiliation was something she had earned. Mabel's voice cut across the room. "Russ?" He lifted both hands. "Just talking." "Then try talking like your mother raised you with furniture indoors." This time the laughter was real. Russ's mouth tightened, but he looked away. Elara should have felt grateful. Instead, she felt exposed. Mabel had defended her, yes, but defense drew eyes, and lately Elara wanted fewer eyes on her, not more. By mid-afternoon, the diner emptied into the wet gray hush that came between lunch and early supper. The rain kept falling, making the parking lot shine black beneath the cloudy sky. Beyond the road, the frozen lake lay still, but the rain stippled its surface in dark pinpricks. Elara took plates to the kitchen, wiped tables, refilled napkins, and tried not to think about the invoice. She failed. There had been others. Small discrepancies at first, receipts that did not match deliveries, vendor names she did not recognize, a replacement freezer part that never arrived, cleaning services charged on days the diner had been closed, and twice her name, not always in the same place, never obvious enough to accuse anyone, just enough to make her feel watched by paper. At 4:15, Mabel disappeared into the back office to take a call. The office door did not close all the way. Elara, reaching for a crate of clean mugs nearby, heard Mabel's voice drop low. "No, I told you not through here anymore." Silence. Then Mabel again, quieter. "She's not part of this." Elara's hand tightened around a mug. The baby shifted. A slow pressure. A reminder. Elara stepped back before the floor creaked beneath her. The office door opened a moment later. Mabel came out holding herself too straight, her face arranged into its usual hard practicality. "You hear anything?" Mabel asked. Elara could have lied better if her heart had not been beating so loudly. "No?" Mabel looked at her for a long second. The old woman's eyes softened, barely, then hardened again as if softness had frightened her. "Good," she said. "Go check the restroom supplies." It was not a request. Elara went. Inside the narrow hallway near the restrooms, the diner's old radiator hissed, like something whispering through its teeth. The walls were crowded with faded photographs, ice fishing contests, 4th of July parades, softball teams from years when everyone wore worse hair and better smiles. Elara passed them without seeing them. At the supply closet, she stopped. The door was open an inch. She knew she had closed it earlier. That was a small thing. Small things had become the language of danger in her life. A shifted envelope, a missing key, a voice that went quiet when she entered a room, a man who smiled too gently and knew too much. Elara pushed the closet door open. Nothing moved. shelves of paper towels, bleach, spare menus, a box of old receipt rolls. On the floor, half hidden beneath a folded mop head, sat a brown file envelope. Her name was on it, this time handwritten, not by her. For several seconds she did not pick it up. She stood with one hand against the doorframe and the other over her belly, breathing through the strange sensation that the room had tilted, though the floor had not moved. Outside, someone entered the diner. The bell rang brightly. Elara flinched. Then she crouched slowly and took the envelope. It was not sealed. Inside were 3 pages clipped together: a delivery acknowledgement, a vendor correction form, and a witness statement. For a damaged shipment. All harmless words, all ordinary. That was how bad things survived. They wore ordinary clothes. At the bottom of the second page was her signature, Elara Quinn. The letters leaned too far right. The Q was wrong. Whoever had written it had copied the shape, not the pressure. Her real signature tightened at the end, almost as if she were pulling the last letter back toward herself. This one opened outward, careless, confident, a forgery pretending to be her hand. Her throat went dry. The baby moved again, sharper this time, and Elara pressed her palm against the place with trembling fingers. "I know," she whispered, though she did not know whether she was speaking to the child, to herself, or to whatever mercy might still be listening above the rain. Behind her, the radiator hissed. From the dining room came Mabel's voice, greeting someone with forced brightness. Elara folded the pages back into the envelope and looked once more at the false signature. Someone had not merely been using her name. Someone was building proof that she had agreed, that she had seen, that she had confirmed. And in White Hollow Lake, where paper could move land, money, reputations, and lives, a false signature was not ink. It was a trap. Outside, freezing rain struck the lake harder. A long, faint crack moved across the ice. Elara stood alone in the supply closet, holding a document that said she had been present for something she had never seen, and for the first time she understood that the worst things happening to her were not accidents. They were preparations. Ronan Hale had learned that silence could be louder than gunfire. It had taken him 41 years, 3 wars that were never officially called wars, and one final mission buried beneath classified language to understand that truth. Now he was driving north beneath a sky the color of old steel, with freezing rain ticking against the windshield of his truck and the dark line of White Hollow country rising ahead of him. The road curved through miles of pine forest, past half-frozen drainage ditches and fields crusted in dirty snow. In the distance, the lake country waited beneath a low white haze. White Hollow Lake was not his home in any warm sense of the word. It was simply the last place he owned something quiet enough to return to. Ronan sat behind the wheel with both hands steady at 10 and 2. He was about 6 feet tall, lean, and compact, built not for display, but endurance. His face was clean-shaven, cut by a square jaw and sharp cheekbones that made him look harder than he often meant to. His dark brown hair was cropped in a military style, though a little longer now than regulation would have allowed. Northern cold had weathered his light skin, leaving it roughened at the cheeks and nose. His gray-blue eyes rarely stayed still. They checked mirrors, tree lines, passing vehicles, empty shoulders. He wore the same old olive-gray tactical combat shirt he had worn too often since leaving service, the fabric softened by years and frayed at the cuffs and shoulders. His combat pants, earth brown with a faded moss-green tone, were worn at the knees, the cargo pockets sagging slightly from use. Old military work boots rested against the pedals. A scratched military watch circled his left wrist, its glass cracked at one corner, but still keeping time. Time, Ronan had learned, was less loyal than dogs. Cale sat in the passenger seat like a second conscience. The German shepherd was 5 years old, yellow and black, with the athletic build of a working-line dog. His chest was deep, his shoulders clean and powerful, his ears upright and exact. Amber brown eyes watched the world with a patience that sometimes made people uncomfortable. A small pale scar near his left ear disappeared into the fur unless the light struck it just right. Around his neck sat an old brown leather collar, darkened by weather and years of use. Kyle was not a cheerful dog in the foolish sense. He did not waste himself on noise. He listened. He judged. And when he moved, Ronan paid attention. The truck heater rattled weakly. The wipers dragged icy water from side to side. On the radio, a local station faded in and out between country music, road warnings, and static. Ronan reached forward and turned it off. The silence that followed was cleaner, but not easier. His last mission returned to him in pieces, as it always did when the weather closed in. A ridge of pale rock under a moonless sky. The breath of his spotter beside him. The green shimmer of night optics. Men moving below where they should not have been. Vehicles without markings. Crates transferred in the dark. The operation had been simple on paper. Observe a criminal logistics cell. Confirm identities. Wait for the authorized strike team. Ronan had been the sniper overwatch, positioned high with his spotter, Derek Vance, a 39-year-old SEAL with a lean runner's frame, close-cropped sandy hair, a permanent half-smile, and a stubborn belief that bad coffee was proof God wanted men to stay humble. Derek had been the kind of man who remembered birthdays, checked straps twice, and made jokes only after everyone else had stopped shaking. That night, Derek had not joked. Through the scope, Ronan had seen more than weapons movement. He had seen ledgers photographed under red light, bank codes printed on thermal paper, names of shell companies linked to land acquisitions in places that had no business being connected to that battlefield. One name had repeated twice on a portable drive screen before the man below snapped the laptop shut. North Vale. Not enough to prove anything. Enough to make Ronan ask questions. He had requested support. Once, then again. Then through a secondary channel. Only silence answered. Not confusion, not delay. Silence. And silence, in the field, was a decision wearing no uniform. By the time the men below began moving toward a second vehicle, the mission had already changed shape. Derek knew it too. Ronan remembered the look his spotter gave him, one eyebrow slightly raised, mouth flat, as if to say, "Well, this is ugly." Then came the first shot from somewhere that was not supposed to have eyes on them. Not Ronan's shot, not their team, someone else. The world became muzzle flashes, stone chips, breath, command, mud, and the wet sound of a man trying to speak around blood. Derek died before dawn. The report called it hostile escalation under compromised visibility. Ronan called it what it was. A door closing from the inside. After that, the military offered him quiet words, sealed forms, and a room with no windows where men in clean uniforms asked whether he was certain of what he had seen. He had been certain. That was the problem. 3 months later, Ronan was no longer Navy, not officially broken, not publicly disgraced, just gone. A man could be removed from war without war being removed from him. Kyle shifted beside him. Not much, only a lift of the head. Ronan glanced over. The dog's ears had angled forward, not toward the windshield, but toward the right side of the road, where the forest thickened and the old county route dipped toward lake country. "What?" Ronan asked softly. Cale did not look at him. The dog's nose worked once, though the windows were closed. His shoulders rose with a slow inhale. Then he placed one front paw against the dashboard, lightly but deliberately. Ronan slowed the truck. The rain changed rhythm, harder now, tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. Ahead, a sign leaned beside the road. White Hollow Lake. 9 miles beneath it, a smaller wooden sign pointed toward an older route. Lake Road /Diner/South Shore. Ronan had not planned to enter town that way. The main road was faster, safer too if the rain kept turning the shoulders slick. But Kyle remained fixed on the side road with an intensity that made the air inside the truck feel smaller. Ronan looked at the sign. He could almost hear Derek's voice in memory, dry and amused. "You know, Hale, when the dog outranks your plan, it is usually because your plan was stupid." Ronan let out something that might have been a breath, might have been the remains of a laugh. He did not turn yet. Instead, he pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. The truck idled beneath the gray sky. Water ran down the windshield in broken lines. Pine branches bent under ice, dripping steadily onto the ditch. No one else was on the road. Kyle remained upright. Then the dog did something he hadn't done since the mission. He lowered his head and pressed his nose against Ronan's wrist, right over the cracked face of the old military watch. It was not affection, not exactly. It was placement, a reminder, a command without force. Ronan looked down at the watch. Derek had fixed that watch once with a paperclip and a curse in a desert outpost thousands of miles away. Ronan had kept wearing it because throwing it away felt too much like agreeing with death. The second hand moved, small, stubborn, alive. For one strange moment, Ronan felt the road, the rain, the dead man, the dog, and the hidden name from that last mission gather into a single quiet pressure. Not supernatural, not prophecy, but the old hard truth that some moments stood at crossroads long before a man understood them. Cale lifted his eyes. Ronan put the truck back into drive. "Fine," he said. "Lake Road." The tires crunched over the icy shoulder as he turned. Lake Road was narrower than he remembered. It slipped between pines and low ridges of snow, passing half-buried mailboxes and dark cabins set far back from the road. Freezing rain glossed the tree trunks and turned every branch into black bone under glass. In summer, this route probably looked peaceful. In winter, it looked like something holding its breath. Ronan drove slower now. His body had entered the old mode without permission. Mirror, shoulder, distance, movement, pattern. He hated how naturally it returned. Hated, too, the part of himself that was relieved. The world was easier when danger had a shape. A mile in, the road curved near a frozen inlet where the lake pressed close to the trees. Through the rain, Ronan saw the white flatness of the ice, and beyond it, the dim roofs of White Hollow Lake. Smoke rose from chimneys. A church steeple stood black against the low sky. Somewhere down there, people were finishing shifts, heating soup, complaining about weather, pretending ordinary life was strong enough to keep wolves outside the door. Cale made a low sound. Ronan looked over. The dog's lips had not pulled back. His teeth did not show. But the sound moved from deep in his chest, controlled and grave. Ahead, headlights appeared around the bend. A black vehicle came toward them, not speeding, not drifting, not doing anything illegal. Still, Ronan's fingers tightened slightly on the wheel. The vehicle was a black SUV with dark windows and clean paint, too polished for the dirty road. It passed close enough for Ronan to glimpse the driver's outline, a man sitting upright, one gloved hand high on the wheel, face turned forward. No hesitation, no curiosity, no wave. As the SUV passed, Cale's growl deepened. Only once. A sound like a door inside the dog had opened and shut. Ronan watched the SUV in the rearview mirror until the curve swallowed it. The rain kept falling. The lake lay frozen beyond the trees. And inside the truck, the silence after Cale's warning felt almost alive. Ronan did not know what waited in White Hollow Lake. Not yet, but the dog had heard something beneath the weather. And Ronan Hale, who had survived war only to learn that danger could wear clean gloves and drive polished cars, kept his foot light on the gas and followed the road down toward town. Frostbite Diner sat at the bend of Lake Road like a stubborn little lantern refusing to admit the weather had won. Its windows glowed amber through the freezing rain. The sign above the door buzzed faintly, half the letters dimmer than the others, so that from the road the place seemed to flicker between welcome and warning. Beyond it, White Hollow Lake lay frozen under a gray afternoon sky, the ice receiving the rain in countless dark pinpricks. Ronan Hale pulled into the gravel lot and cut the engine. For a moment, he did not move. Inside the truck, the air held the faint smell of wet canvas, dog fur, old leather, and the cold metal scent that came before real winter trouble. Cale sat upright in the passenger seat, amber-brown eyes fixed on the diner windows. The German shepherd's yellow-black coat caught the weak light from the sign. His ears were forward, his body still. Not excited, not curious. Alert. Ronan looked at the diner, then at the road behind him. He did not want coffee badly enough for this. He did not want company. He did not want local questions. He did not want the familiar little rituals of small-town life where people recognized a face, placed a name beside it, and then asked soft questions with hard hooks hidden inside. But Kyle did not look away. Ronan sighed once, low and tired. 10 minutes, he said. Cale blinked. That was as close to agreement as the dog ever gave. Rain struck Ronan's shoulders as he stepped out. He wore his old olive-gray tactical combat shirt beneath a weather-dark jacket, the cuffs of the shirt frayed, the fabric faded by time and colder places than this. His earth-brown combat pants brushed against his worn military work boots as he crossed the lot. The old watch on his wrist ticked beneath the sleeve, a small stubborn sound he felt more than heard. Cale jumped down beside him without command. The bell over the diner door rang when they entered. Warmth hit first, then the smell of burnt coffee, frying onions, wet wool, and old grease settled into the bones of the place. Red vinyl booths lined the windows. A few locals sat scattered across the room, shoulders hunched over mugs, speaking in the low, practical tones of people who believed weather was a valid personality trait. Behind the counter, Mabel Crane looked up. At 67, Mabel had the compact shape of someone built by work rather than comfort. Her silver-white hair was pinned in a low bun, and her round, lined face carried the severity of a woman who had no patience left for useless men or weak coffee. A brown sweater showed beneath her dark, checked apron. Her pale blue eyes moved from Ronan to Cale and narrowed, not with fear, but measurement. "No dogs," she said. Ronan glanced down at Cale. Cale stood beside him, unmoving, gaze already searching the room. "Service-trained," Ronan said. It was not entirely a lie. Cale had been trained for more than service, but there were truths too complicated for diner entrances. Mabel held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she looked at the dog again. Cale looked back. Something passed between old woman and animal that had nothing to do with paperwork. "Booth by the far wall," Mabel said. "If he bites Russ, I'm not cleaning it up." From a booth near the counter, Russ Cafferty laughed too loudly. Russ was around 40, broad and heavy, with a rough jaw shadowed by dark stubble, short brown hair flattened under a damp winter cap, and muddy eyes that carried the sour amusement of a man who enjoyed making smaller people feel cornered. His black work jacket was stained at the sleeves. His cheeks were flushed with drink or cold, maybe both. "Dog looks smarter than most people in here," Russ said. Mabel poured coffee without smiling. "Then try not to embarrass yourself in front of him." A few locals chuckled. Ronan moved to the booth. That was when he saw Ilara Quinn. She came from the kitchen carrying a tray, one hand steady beneath the plates, the other resting briefly against the curve of her pregnancy. She was 28, though exhaustion made her seem older in the eyes and younger in the face. Her dark brown hair was tied low, loosened by the day. A few strands clung near her cheeks. Her face was pale, fine-boned, too tired for its own softness. She wore a thin gray-cream sweater beneath an old blue-gray parka that had seen too many winters, dark jeans made practical by necessity, and brown winter, boots marked with road salt. She moved carefully, not helplessly. There was a difference. Ronan noticed. He wished he had not. Ilara set plates down at booth 3, nodded at a man who did not thank her, then turned toward the counter. Her eyes passed over Ronan without stopping. Then they dropped to Kyle. For half a second, her expression changed. Not fear. Recognition, almost. As if she knew what it meant when a creature watched a room more honestly than the people inside it. Cale took one slow step forward. Ronan's hand lowered slightly. "Easy." The dog stopped, but his attention remained on Ilara. Mabel came to Ronan's booth with coffee. "You eating?" "Just coffee." "That's not eating." "I know." She studied him. "You hail?" Ronan looked up. "Depends who's asking." "The woman holding the pot." Yes. Mabel's expression did not soften, but something old moved behind it. Your uncle used to come in before the lake road washed out years back. Sat in the same booth, paid exact change. Never tipped enough. Sounds like him. I liked him anyway. She walked off before sentiment could catch up. Ronan wrapped one hand around the mug and looked out the window. 10 minutes, he reminded himself. A man could survive 10 minutes anywhere. Then Cale lowered his head. The dog turned, not toward Alara this time, not toward Russ, but toward the narrow hallway near the kitchen and back exit. His nose worked once. His shoulders tightened. He took 2 steps, slow and deliberate, then stopped near a patch of damp flooring where no customer should have tracked water from that direction. Ronan followed with his eyes. A footprint marked the old tile. Not large, not clear, but it carried dark grit, like mud from somewhere other than the front lot. Pine needles clung near the edge of it. Cale placed one paw beside the mark and looked back at Ronan. The diner noise seemed to dull around them. It was not magic. It was not a miracle dressed in fur. It was attention, the kind humans forgot when they wanted trouble to announce itself politely. Ronan stared at the footprint a moment longer than he should have. Mabel noticed. So did Alara. But before anyone could speak, Russ shoved himself out of his booth. He had been watching Alara with the patience of a bad thought waiting to become action. Now he crossed toward her as she reached for a coffee refill near the counter. "Ellie," he said, stretching the name into something ugly. "You forgot me." Alara did not turn fully. "I'll bring it over." "I'm standing here now." His hand closed around her wrist. The room shifted. Not loudly. That was the shame of it. A fork paused over a plate. A man looked down into his cup. Someone near the window pretended the rain had become interesting. Alara's face tightened with pain before she hit it. "Let go," she said. Russ smiled. "I'm not hurting you." Men like him always said that while testing how much hurt counted. Ronan's body began to move before his mind allowed it, then stopped. For one breath, he was not in the diner. He was high on stone under a foreign sky, hearing Derek Vance choke on blood while the radio stayed empty. He saw again the people below who had not known help had failed before it ever arrived. He remembered the terrible discipline of not moving until the order came. Orders had cost enough. Kyle moved first. The German shepherd crossed the diner floor without a bark, without a lunge, without any wasted force. He placed himself between Alara and Russ, body angled, ears upright, amber eyes fixed on the man's chest. Russ froze. Not because Cale attacked, because Cale had decided. Ronan stood then, slowly. Every eye in the diner found him. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He stepped close enough that Russ had to look up slightly, and that alone changed the balance of the room. "Let go," Ronan said. Russ's fingers remained around Alara's wrist. "You local?" Russ asked. "No." "Then maybe don't start local problems?" Ronan looked at the hand on Alara, then at Russ. "I'm not starting one." Something in Ronan's stillness did what anger could not. Russ released her wrist with a little shove, as if pretending he had meant to all along. Kyle did not move. Alara pulled her hand back against her chest. Her breath trembled once. She hated that it did. Ronan saw the hatred flicker through her eyes before she lowered them. Russ tried to laugh. "Everybody's sensitive now." Ronan reached out and took Russ by the sleeve, not hard, not dramatic, just enough to redirect the man's weight. With one clean movement, he turned Russ away from Alara and put him back a step. It was so controlled that it looked almost gentle. Russ staggered anyway. His sleeve rode up. On the inside of his wrist, just above the pulse, Ronan saw a small mark in dark ink. Not a full tattoo. More like a symbol. 3 short bars crossing a broken circle. For a second, the diner disappeared again. Red light over a portable case. A gloved hand moving files. A stamp on a crate under night optics. Not the same image. The same shape. Ronan released Russ. His face did not change, but something old and cold opened behind his ribs. Russ yanked his sleeve down. "You got a problem?" Ronan's eyes stayed on him. "Not yet." Mabel came around the counter, voice sharp as a cleaver. "Russ, out." "What?" "You heard me." Russ looked from Mabel to Ronan to Kyle. His pride wanted an audience. His nerves wanted distance. Distance won. He grabbed his cap from the booth and shoved toward the door, muttering words no one needed to answer. The bell rang hard when he left. For a moment, the diner held its breath. Then, as people often do after cowardice, the locals pretended nothing important had happened. Forks moved. Coffee cups lifted. Someone coughed. Ilara stood very still. Ronan turned to her. "You okay?" She almost said yes. It sat ready on her tongue, polished by repetition. Instead, she looked at Kyle. The dog had stepped back, giving her space, but his eyes remained steady, not demanding gratitude, not asking for proof, only present. Ilara swallowed. "I don't know," she said. It was the most honest answer in the room. Mabel touched Ilara's shoulder, brief and rough, then removed her hand as if tenderness might burn. "Go sit in the back." "I have tables." "I said sit." Ilara hesitated, then nodded. Before she left, her gaze flicked once to Ronan. There was fear there, but not of him. That mattered. Ronan returned to his booth, though the coffee had gone cold. He had no appetite for questions and less patience for destiny. He did not believe in it. Destiny was what people called consequences when they wanted them to sound holy. Still, Cale stood near the aisle and refused to lie down. Ronan left cash under the mug. Too much. Mabel noticed, but did not mention it. As he moved toward the door, she said quietly, "You passing through?" Ronan paused. "Maybe." Mabel's eyes went to the hallway, then back to him. "Passing through is easier." "Yes," Ronan said, but easier had rarely meant right. The bell rang as he stepped into the rain. Cale followed, then stopped on the threshold. Ronan turned. The German shepherd was not looking at the parking lot, not the road, not the people inside. He was looking toward the back of the diner, where the narrow hallway led to the rear door. No one stood there. The door was closed. Yet Cale's body became still in that grave, listening way Ronan knew too well. Something had passed through that place, or someone, and whatever it was, the dog had not forgotten its scent. Ronan looked once through the rain-dark glass at Ilara's pale face disappearing into the back room. Then he looked at Cale. 10 minutes, he murmured. The dog did not blink. Ronan understood then that 10 minutes had already become something larger, something he had not asked for, something he would not be able to leave cleanly behind. Ronan Hale did not leave Frostbite Diner. He stepped into the rain, stood beneath the weak buzz of the sign, watched Cale stare through the glass toward the rear of the building, and understood with a weariness older than thought that leaving would not make the uneasiness smaller. It would only make him a man who had seen something wrong and chosen the comfort of distance. He had already done that once in another life, or close enough to it that the difference no longer mattered. The freezing rain had softened to a fine mist, drifting across the gravel lot and silvering the shoulders of his old jacket. Beyond the diner, White Hollow Lake lay still beneath its skin of ice. The world looked pale and orderly, as if everything dangerous had politely agreed to stay underground. Kyle turned his head toward Ronan. The German shepherd did not whine, he did not pull. His amber-brown eyes simply held Ronan's with the grave patience of a creature waiting for a slower species to catch up. "Yeah?" Ronan said quietly. "I know." He went back inside. The bell over the door rang again, and this time every head turned. Not openly. Small-town people rarely stared honestly. They glanced from the sides of their eyes, through steam from coffee cups, over the rims of water glasses, behind newspapers that had already been read. Ronan felt the room measure him again, but now the measurement had changed. A stranger who bought coffee was one thing. A stranger who put Russ Cafferty in his place was another? Mabel Crane stood behind the counter with a dish towel twisted once around her hand. Her lined face betrayed nothing, but her pale blue eyes sharpened when Ronan crossed back to the booth. "I thought you were passing through," she said. "So did I." That answer usually means trouble. Ronan looked toward the hallway where Ilara had disappeared. Trouble was already here. Mabel's jaw moved once, as though she had bitten down on a word and found it too bitter to swallow. Cale remained at Ronan's side, but his attention drifted over the room with that controlled precision that made even harmless people sit a little straighter. His yellow-black coat was damp along the shoulders, but he did not shake himself dry. He watched. He listened. He saved his energy for meaning. Mabel set a fresh cup of coffee in front of Ronan, though he hadn't asked for one. "On the house," she said. "That does not make us friends." "I didn't assume." "Good. Assumptions rot faster than milk." From the kitchen doorway, Ilara Quinn appeared again. She had changed only in small ways, but Ronan noticed all of them. Her hand was now wrapped loosely in a dish towel where Russ had grabbed her wrist. Her face was pale, not simply from fear, but from the humiliation of being seen in a moment she had not chosen. Her dark hair had slipped farther from its low tie, softening the edges of her face in a way that made her exhaustion more visible. She stopped when she saw Ronan still there. "I'm all right," she said before anyone asked. Mabel made a sound through her nose. "That sentence has lied more than most politicians." Ilara's mouth tightened. "I said I'm fine." "No," Ronan said, quietly enough that only the two women near him could hear. "You said you were all right." Ilara looked at him then, really looked. There was suspicion in her blue-gray eyes, and Ronan respected it. Suspicion was not rudeness. Sometimes it was the last unbroken tool a person had. "You always listen that closely?" she asked. "When people are trying not to say something." Mabel's hand went still on the counter. For a moment, the three of them stood inside the diner's warm, greasy air while rain whispered against the windows and the lake beyond held its silence. Then Mabel reached beneath the counter and flipped the sign in the door from open to closed. It was only 4:30. A man near the far booth lifted his head. "Mabel?" "Storm's making roads slick," she said. "Go home before your tires decide for you." People grumbled, paid, shuffled into coats, and left in 2s and 3s. No one argued with Mabel long. She had fed most of them through funerals, blizzards, divorces, and Christmas mornings when pipes burst. That gave a woman a kind of authority no badge could imitate. When the last customer left, the diner became larger and lonelier. Mabel locked the Yawbay door. Ilara hugged her arms beneath her belly. "You shouldn't have closed early." Mabel turned. "You think I did that for charity?" "No." "Good. I hate being misunderstood as kind." Kyle moved then. He walked slowly toward the side wall near the hallway, nose low, paws silent against the old tile. Ronan followed with his eyes, but did not call him back. The dog stopped near a framed community notice board. The board held flyers layered over older flyers. Winter tire discounts, church supper, missing cat, blood drive, lake safety warnings, and a glossy announcement showing a smiling man standing beside a group of town officials. Ronan rose and crossed toward it. At the top of the flyer, printed in clean blue letters, was the name. North Vale Consortium. Community Renewal Initiative. Beneath it stood a man in a charcoal wool coat, one hand resting lightly on the shoulder of an elderly woman seated beside him. He looked about 42, tall and polished, with a long, clean-shaven face, dark brown hair carefully combed, fair skin untouched by weather, and gray eyes that somehow managed to appear compassionate without softening. His smile was measured, not warm, useful. Ilara saw what Ronan was looking at. "Adrian Voss," she said. The name entered the room like a draft beneath a closed door. Mabel looked away first. Ronan noticed. "What is he?" Ronan asked. Ilara gave a humorless little breath. "That depends who you ask. Investor, donor, savior of dying towns. The man who bought new heaters for the church basement and made sure everyone knew he didn't want credit for it. Mabel muttered, "People who don't want credit rarely bring photographers." Ilara's fingers tightened around the towel at her wrist. "He came here last fall," she continued. "At first he was polite, asked about the diner books, said he was helping small businesses qualify for winter assistance grants. Mabel told him to get out." "I told him to eat road salt first," Mabel said. "He came back anyway," Ilara said. "Not always himself, sometimes someone else. Forms started appearing, vendor corrections, receiving confirmations, damage statements." Ronan turned from the flyer. "With your name on them?" Ilara's eyes flicked to Mabel. There it was. Not guilt exactly, fear with a longer history. Mabel untied and retied her apron once. "The diner's been barely alive for 3 winters. Roof repair, freezer trouble, taxes. North Vale offered bridge funding." "You took it," Ronan said. Mabel's face hardened. "I took time. There's a difference." "Not to people who write contracts." The old woman's mouth closed. Ilara stepped to the register and pulled open the drawer beneath it. From under a stack of menus, she removed several folded papers. She laid them on the counter one by one. Numbers, dates, supplier codes, receipts. Her hand shook only slightly. "I started comparing them after my name appeared the first time," she said. "At first I thought it was bookkeeping mistakes. Then I found corrected versions replacing originals." Ronan studied the papers without touching them. Some totals had been altered by small amounts, not enough to trigger alarm unless seen beside the first version. The vendor names shifted too. Local suppliers replaced with entities that sounded legitimate but carried the same mailing address line. North Vale subsidiaries, likely. Ilara pointed to one page. "This says I confirmed spoiled inventory disposal. I didn't. This one says I received a freezer compressor. I didn't. This one says I witnessed storm damage before a claim was filed." "And did you?" Ronan asked. "No." "Why use you?" Her face went still. That was when the room changed. Ilara looked toward the rain-dark window where her reflection hovered faintly over the white blur of the lake beyond. "Because people already think I'm unstable enough not to believe," she said. The sentence did not ask for pity. That made it worse. Mabel's eyes shone for half a second before she turned sharply toward the coffee pots and began cleaning something that was already clean. Ronan looked at Ilara's wrapped wrist, at the curve of her pregnancy, at the papers laid out like small white traps. "Who else?" he asked. Ilara swallowed. "Older property owners along the South Shore, people without close family, people who needed medical help, people who signed review authorizations and later couldn't remember exactly what they agreed to." Mabel spoke without turning. Hetty Lawson lost half her dock rights and thought she had signed for snow removal. "Not just her," Ilara said. "Mr. Vale from Pine Row, the Brenner sisters, a man named Cole who went into assisted living after a fall." Ronan heard the pattern before she finished. Vulnerability translated into paperwork. Loneliness converted into consent. It was cleaner than violence and colder than theft. Kyle scratched lightly at the wall. Once. Everyone turned. The German shepherd stood beneath the community board, head lowered, one paw touching the old wooden baseboard. He did not dig wildly. He did not damage anything. He simply tapped the same spot again, then looked at Ronan. Mabel frowned. "What's he doing?" "His job," Ronan said. He crouched beside the dog. The baseboard near the floor looked ordinary, but one corner was newer than the rest. Same paint, different brush marks. Ronan pressed his thumb against it. The wood flexed. Ilara took one step closer. "That wall backs the old storage closet." Mabel's face drained of color. "No one uses that gap." Ronan looked at her. The old woman's voice went rough. "Not anymore." He did not ask what that meant. Not yet. Using the small blade from his pocket tool, Ronan eased the loose strip outward. It gave with a soft wooden click. Something fell into his palm. A small black storage device wrapped in clear plastic. No dust, no age. Recent. Ilara's breath caught. Mabel whispered something that might have been a prayer or a curse. In White Hollow Lake, Ronan suspected the two often shared clothing. Cale sat back on his haunches. For the first time since Ronan entered the diner, the dog lowered his head slightly, not in submission, but in completion. As if he had known the wall was carrying a secret and had merely waited for humans to admit walls did not keep secrets forever. Ronan placed the device on the counter. Nobody touched it. Outside, the freezing rain slowed, but the sound of water on ice remained, faint and restless. "I have an old laptop," Mabel said after a moment. "Kitchen office." Her voice made it clear she hated every word. The office smelled of paper, burnt dust from a space heater, and decades of unpaid worry. Mabel's laptop was thick, outdated, and slow to wake, but it worked. Ronan did not plug the device in immediately. He checked the machine, disabled the wireless connection, and opened it under a guest profile so old it was probably safer than most modern systems by accident rather than design. Ilara watched from the doorway, one arm around her middle. "You know how to do this?" she asked. "I know enough not to trust anything." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." Mabel stood behind them with her arms crossed. "If that thing ruins my computer, I'm adding it to the list of people I hate." Ronan inserted the device. 3 folders appeared. Vendor logs, property review care status. The last folder made Ilara go very still. Ronan opened it. A list filled the screen. Names, dates, notes, status indicators. Some entries were marked elderly, isolated, medically dependent, financially distressed. Then Ilara saw her own name. Ilara Quinn, subject unstable, custody evaluation pending. No one spoke. The office seemed to shrink around the glow of the screen. Ilara reached for the edge of the desk, not because she was weak, but because the floor had become uncertain beneath a truth too ugly to stand on without help. Ronan read the line again. Custody. The word sat there like a knife laid politely beside a plate. Mabel covered her mouth with one hand. Kyle came to Ilara's side and pressed his shoulder gently against her leg. Not enough to push, just enough to remind her she was still in the room, still standing, still more than a line in someone else's file. Ilara looked down at the dog, then back at her name on the screen. Her voice, when it came, was small but clear. "They're not just using my signature," she said. Ronan stared at the file, his gray-blue eyes gone cold. "No," he said. The rain stopped. Somewhere out on the frozen lake, another crack moved through the ice, long and hidden beneath the white. And in the dim little office of Frostbite Diner, Ilara Quinn understood that someone had not only been preparing to take her credibility, they had been preparing to take her child. The line on Mabel Crane's old laptop did not vanish when Ronan shut the screen. It stayed in the room. It stayed in Ilara Quinn's face. It stayed in the way Mabel stood with one hand braced against the office wall, as if age had suddenly remembered her bones. The diner, which had always carried the smells of coffee, grease, old sugar, and wet coats, now felt like a room where something sacred had been violated by paperwork. Ilara did not cry. Ronan almost wished she had. Tears would have been easier to understand. Instead, she stood beside the office desk with her blue-gray eyes fixed on the closed laptop, one hand pressed beneath the curve of her belly, the other gripping the edge of Mabel's chair. Her face had gone pale in a way that did not belong only to fear. It was the look of someone realizing that danger had not been chasing her from behind. It had already walked ahead and built a place to wait for her. "They weren't trying to prove I did something," she said quietly. Ronan looked at her. "They were trying to prove I couldn't be believed." Mabel made a rough sound. "Ilara?" "No." Ilara turned toward her, and for the first time that afternoon, there was anger in her voice strong enough to warm it. "Don't soften it. Please don't. If I let anyone soften it, I'll start thinking I misunderstood." Ronan knew that kind of sentence. A person said it when their own memory had been attacked so often that truth needed witnesses just to stand upright. Kyle sat near Alara's boots, his yellow-black body still, his amber eyes moving between her face and the hallway beyond the office. The German Shepherd had not relaxed since the storage device was found. Not fully. The small scar near his left ear caught the overhead light whenever he turned his head, a pale mark in dark fur, like a reminder that instinct was not born from comfort. Ronan opened the laptop once more, but he did not connect it to anything. He copied no files yet. He simply photographed the folder names with his phone and then powered the machine down. Mabel watched him. That enough? No. Then why stop? Because whoever hid that knew someone might open it. I don't know what else is on there. Alara looked at him. You think it could be dangerous? I think people who build traps rarely build just one. Outside, evening thickened. The freezing rain had turned the windows into blurred mirrors. Through the glass, the parking lot looked empty, but emptiness was not the same as safety. Mabel moved first. She went to the front, checked the lock, pulled the blinds down halfway, then came back with the heavy decisiveness of a woman choosing a side and resenting how late she had chosen it. You can't go home tonight, she said to Alara. Ilara's mouth tightened. I don't have anywhere else. Mabel glanced at Ronan. Ronan saw the question before she asked it. No, Alara said immediately. The word came too fast, too sharp. Ronan did not take offense. You don't know me. That's one reason. There are others. She looked down, ashamed of needing to protect herself from help. I've learned that men who appear at the right moment often bring a bill later. Mabel's face flinched. Ronan nodded once. Fair. The answer seemed to unsettle Alara more than argument would have. He did not offer comfort. Comfort, given too quickly, could feel like pressure. He only said, My cabin is outside town, North Ridge. No neighbors close enough to gossip. You can stay in the main room. Door locks from the inside. Kyle stays with you if you want him there. At the sound of his name, Kale rose and stepped closer to Alara, not touching her, only standing near enough to be chosen. Alara looked at the dog. For a strange second, her guarded expression shifted. The room saw something in her that had not survived around people lately. Trust, not given to a man, but offered cautiously to an animal who had already proven he did not need words to understand fear. Mabel folded her arms. You can trust the dog. Alara gave a small, broken laugh. That's not exactly a character reference for him. For Ronan? No. For the dog? Absolutely. Even Ronan almost smiled. Almost. They left by the back door after Mabel packed a bag of food without asking permission. Bread, soup, apples, a thermos of coffee, 2 jars of stew, and a paper sack of muffins that she insisted were too ugly to sell, though they looked perfect. Mabel placed the bag in Ronan's hands. Her eyes did not meet Alara's when she said, I should have spoken sooner. Alara looked at her for a long moment. Yes, she said. Mabel's face tightened. Then Alara added, softer, but you're speaking now. That was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was a bridge plank laid over dark water. The drive to Ronan's cabin took 20 minutes through wooded roads, silvered by freezing rain. Alara sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in her parka, both hands resting over her belly. Kale rode in the back this time, but he leaned forward between the seats, watchful and grave, his warm breath occasionally touching Alara's sleeve. Ronan drove without music. He sensed Alara studying him in brief glances. You were military? She said finally. Yes. People in town said, SEAL. People in town say more than they know. But it's true. Yes. She nodded, not impressed, not reassured, only filing the fact away. Is that why you noticed the papers? No. Then why? Ronan kept his eyes on the road. Because people who want control don't start with violence if signatures work better. Alara went still. That sounded personal, she said. It is." He did not explain further, and to her credit, she did not dig. Some wounds were like frozen lakes. A person could cross them if careful, but no decent soul drove a truck through the middle just to see how deep they went. The cabin stood on a rise above the north shore, dark timber against the pale evening, with smoke-stained stonework around the chimney and snow piled high along the porch edges. It was not cozy in the decorative way. Nothing hung where it did not serve a purpose. Firewood stacked under a tarp, boots aligned near the door, tools hung in order inside the entry. The place felt like its owner, restrained, useful, and prepared for weather to be worse than promised. Inside, heat lingered from banked coals in the stove. Ronan built the fire up while Alara stood just inside the door, uncertain where to put her fear. Kyle solved that by walking to the hearth and lying down with enough space beside him for her. Alara looked at Ronan. "He's inviting you," Ronan said. "He doesn't look like the inviting type." "He makes exceptions." She sat carefully near the stove, lowering herself with one hand on the arm of an old chair. Kyle placed his head on his paws, watching her through half-lowered eyes. For nearly an hour, the cabin held a fragile quiet. Mabel's stew warmed on the stove. Rain tapped the roof. Ronan checked the locks, then the windows, then the old radio in the kitchen. Alara ate only a little, but more than she claimed she could. The color returned faintly to her cheeks. Once the baby shifted strongly enough that she winced and then smiled despite herself. Ronan saw the smile and looked away. Not because it embarrassed her, because tenderness had become more difficult for him to face than pain. Later, as darkness gathered fully around the cabin, Alara sat at the table with a blanket over her shoulders. The paper bag from Mabel rested nearby, untouched now. Her phone lay beside it, screen dark. "I thought being alone was safer," she said. Ronan finished checking the latch on the back door. "Sometimes it is." She looked at him. "Not always?" "No." A silence followed. Then Alara whispered, "If they call me unstable, will people believe it?" Ronan did not answer quickly. "Yes," he said. Her face fell, not because the answer surprised her, but because honesty sometimes hurt more than comfort. Then he added, "Some will, not all." "How do you know?" Ronan looked at Cale by the stove. "Because one living thing already didn't." Alara followed his gaze. Cale lifted his head, as if hearing the weight placed gently upon him. His ears were relaxed, his expression calm. He looked nothing like a miracle, nothing like myth. Only a dog, scarred and loyal, lying beside a fire with winter pressing against the walls. And yet Ilara's eyes filled. She wiped them quickly. "I hate crying in front of strangers," she said. "You're not crying in front of strangers." She gave him a faint look. "I've known you for one afternoon." Ronan nodded toward Cale. "I meant him." For the first time, Alara laughed. Small, brief, rusted from disuse, but real. Then the lights went out, not flickered, not dimmed. Out. The cabin dropped into darkness except for the red-orange breath of the stove and the blue-gray shine of snowlight at the windows. Alara sucked in a sharp breath. Kyle was already standing. Ronan moved without haste because haste wasted motion. He took the flashlight from the shelf beside the door, checked Alara with one glance, then crossed to the window. "Stay seated," he said. "I wasn't planning a parade." The humor was thin, but it was still there. Good. He looked outside. No headlights, no figures, no movement near the porch. Only the dark bulk of pines and the pale ground reflecting what little light the sky had left. Kyle stood at the front door, body rigid, nose angled toward the left side of the cabin. Ronan followed the dog's line. Breaker box. He opened the door. Cold came in like water. Outside, the air had sharpened. The rain had stopped, leaving every branch glazed, every step treacherous. Ronan moved along the side wall, flashlight low, boots careful over ice-crusted snow. The metal cover of the breaker box hung open. The main switch had been thrown by hand. Ronan stood very still, not storm damage, not old wiring, not coincidence. He swept the flashlight toward the ground. There, beyond the drip line of the roof, pressed into the thin skin of wet snow and frozen mud, were tire marks. Not close to the cabin, not bold enough to be a visit, just far enough to say someone had come near, watched, and left before courage became evidence. When Ronan stepped back inside, Ilara knew before he spoke. Her face had gone white again. Her hands clutched the blanket around her shoulders, but the tremor in her body was not only from cold. With the power gone, the cabin temperature was already beginning to drop at the edges. Darkness seeping into corners the stove could not reach fast enough. "They know," she said. Ronan closed the door and locked it. "They know you're not alone," he said. Somehow that frightened her more. Kyle returned to her side, pressing his warm body against her knee. Ilara lowered one shaking hand to his fur. Then her phone lit up on the table. The glow was small, almost gentle. That made it worse. No name appeared, no number she recognized. Only one message: "You are not the one who decides that child's future." Ilara stared at the screen. Ronan did too. Outside, beyond the cabin walls, the frozen lake and black trees held their silence. And for the first time since the diner, Ilara Quinn understood that invisibility had ended. Someone had reached through the dark and touched her life by name. Morning did not bring peace to Ronan Hale's cabin. It brought light. Cold, colorless northern light pressed through the windows and laid itself across the floorboards like evidence. The fire had burned low in the stove, but the room still held a stubborn warmth, the kind made by watchfulness rather than comfort. Ilara Quinn sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of tea she had barely touched. Her face looked thinner in daylight, her blue-gray eyes shadowed from a night without real sleep. Her dark brown hair had come loose from its low tie and fell in tired strands around her cheeks. Beneath the blanket around her shoulders, the curve of her pregnancy seemed more fragile now, not because she was weak, but because fear had a way of making even life look endangered. Kyle lay at her feet. The 5-year-old German shepherd had not truly slept. His yellow-black coat caught the glow from the stove, his amber eyes half open, his ears turning toward every shift in the trees, every pop of wood in the fire, every breath Ilara tried to hide when pain touched low across her abdomen. Ronan stood by the front window. He had been there long enough for the cold coming off the glass to numb the backs of his fingers. His old olive-gray tactical shirt was rumpled from the night, frayed at the cuffs, the faded fabric stretched across his lean, compact frame. His clean-shaven face looked harder in the morning, square jaw set, gray-blue eyes moving from tree line to road and back again. He had not called the police right away. That was not reluctance. It was discipline. People who moved too soon sometimes handed their enemy a map of their fear. Ronan had learned that in war. He had learned it again in civilian clothes, where danger signed forms, drove polished vehicles, and used polite language for ugly things. At 7:20, Ilara's phone rang. Both of them looked at it. The screen showed an unfamiliar number from Duluth. Ilara's hand froze around the mug. Ronan did not touch the phone. "Your choice." She stared at it until the 4th ring. Then she answered on speaker. "Ms. Quinn," said a woman's voice, smooth and professionally gentle. "This is Dr. Meredith Selane from the North Shore Behavioral Wellness Network. I'm calling to confirm an urgent prenatal emotional stability consultation." Ilara's face emptied. Ronan's eyes narrowed. "I didn't request that," Ilara said. There was a pause, short but telling. "I understand these conversations can feel unexpected," the woman replied. "A concern was submitted regarding your stress response, decision-making capacity, and prenatal safety environment." Ilara's fingers tightened so hard around the mug that Ronan thought it might crack. "Submitted by who?" "I'm not permitted to disclose all referral details during initial contact." Ronan stepped closer to the table, but still did not speak. The voice continued, warmer now, as if kindness were a tool being sharpened. Ms. Quinn, these assessments are not punitive. They exist to make sure both mother and child receive appropriate support. Elara closed her eyes. There it was, the velvet rope around her throat. "I'm under the care of a local physician," she said. "May I ask who?" "No." Another pause, this one colder. Refusal to cooperate may be noted. Elara opened her eyes. Something inside them steadied, not peace, not courage exactly, but insult finally finding its spine. "Then note this," she said. "I do not consent." She ended the call. For several seconds, only the stove spoke. Kyle rose slowly and put his head against her knee. Elara's hand found his fur. "They're making the story before I can tell the truth," she whispered. Ronan looked at the silent phone. "Yes?" By 9, the story had already begun moving through White Hollow Lake. Mabel called first. Her voice came sharp and low through Ronan's phone, the way people spoke when they wanted to sound angry because afraid would cost too much. "Somebody asked Fern at the pharmacy if Elara had been acting strange at work," Mabel said. "Fern told Norma at the post office. Norma told God and 3 widows." Ronan looked toward Elara, who sat still at the table, pretending not to listen. "What exactly are they saying?" "That she ran off with a stranger, that the diner argument was a breakdown, that she's been confused lately." Mabel stopped. When she spoke again, her voice was rougher. "And that people are worried about the baby." Elara's face went white. Kyle pressed closer. Ronan's jaw tightened. "Who started it?" "No one starts rumors in this town," Mabel said bitterly. "They just appear wearing clean shoes." An hour later, Dr. Iris Calloway arrived. She came in a dark green SUV dusted with road salt, parking near the porch but not blocking the drive. Ronan watched her step out carrying a canvas medical bag. Iris was 36, about 5'7", with a slim, capable frame shaped by long clinic shifts and winter house calls. Her light brown hair was tied low at the nape of her neck, practical rather than styled. She had a clear, angular face, light skin reddened by cold, and green-gray eyes that missed very little. She wore a pale gray turtleneck beneath a dark olive medical parka, dark utility pants, waterproof boots, and the expression of a woman who could be kind without being fooled. Ronan opened the door before she knocked. "Iris Calloway," she said. "Mabel called me. Then I got a call I didn't like." "From Duluth?" Ronan asked. Her eyes sharpened. "So they contacted her, too?" Elara stood carefully from the table. "You're the local doctor?" "I am." Iris stepped inside, then stopped when Cale appeared from beside the stove. The dog did not growl. He only watched. Iris lowered her hand, palm loose. "You must be Cale." Cale sniffed once, then stepped back. Iris gave a faint nod. "That's more approval than half my patients give me." Elara almost smiled. Almost. Iris examined her near the fire, careful and direct. Blood pressure, pulse, hydration, questions about pain, dizziness, fetal movement. She treated Elara not like a fragile object, but like the owner of her own body. That alone changed the air in the room. When she finished, her expression remained calm, but her eyes had grown serious. "You're not in active labor," Iris said, "but your body is under too much stress. These tightenings are warning signs. You need rest, fluids, food, and fewer shocks." Elara gave a small, humorless breath. "I'll write the threats a letter." Iris looked at Ronan. "Whoever is doing this knows how to create medical language around control." Ronan nodded. "That's the point." Before Iris could answer, Cale moved, not toward the window, toward Elara. He rose from beside the hearth and walked to where her parka hung over the chair. He nosed at the pocket once, then backed away, ears forward. Elara frowned and reached into it. She pulled out a folded diner receipt. It had not been there before. The receipt was blank except for one line written across the back in neat black ink. "People believe records before women. No one spoke. Iris took the paper with gloved fingers and placed it flat on the table. Ronan's face went still. Mabel had packed that coat in a hurry. Ronan had carried the bag. Ilara had worn the parka from diner to cabin. Someone had slipped the message close enough to touch her clothes before they left, or earlier when everyone was looking at the wrong danger. Ilara stared at the words. Then she looked at Kyle. The dog stood beside her, quiet and certain, as if he had pulled a thorn from the dark. Iris's voice softened. That dog may have just saved this from becoming only your word. Ronan photographed the note. Then he wrote the time down. Small acts, necessary acts, turning fear into record. By afternoon, Deputy Lucas Pike called. Ronan knew the name, though they had never been friendly. Lucas was 34, a local deputy with a solid field build, about 5'11", brown hair cut short, and a square, open face that made his feelings easier to read than his training probably allowed. He wore the law with sincerity, which in Ronan's experience could be either a virtue or a weakness, depending on who stood above him. Lucas sounded strained over the phone. "Hale, I got a complaint that you're sheltering a pregnant woman against advice." Ronan looked across the room at Ilara. "She's here by choice." "I figured," Lucas said. "That's why I'm calling instead of showing up with my lights on." That earned him half a point. Ronan said nothing. Lucas continued. "Mabel Crane called me. Dr. Calloway called me. Then someone from North. Vale's legal office called the sheriff's desk asking whether we had a welfare concern on file." Iris, standing near the stove, muttered, "Efficient parasites." Lucas heard enough to pause. "Is that Iris?" "Yes," Ronan said. "Good. Then I'm less worried about medical neglect and more worried about why everyone suddenly wants paperwork on one woman." "Can you come out?" Ronan asked. "I'm trying. There's a utility truck dead sideways across East Lake Road, blocking the fastest route out of your area and half the service access." Ronan's eyes moved to the window. "Accident?" Lucas did not answer immediately. "Could be," he said at last, "but I don't like the timing." Neither did Ronan. By late afternoon, the cabin had become a place of quiet preparation. Iris laid out supplies in case Ilara's contractions worsened. Ronan moved his truck to angle across the drive, not dramatically, just enough to slow anything coming in. Cale paced between the front door and Ilara's chair, his nails clicking softly on the floorboards like a clock measuring danger. Ilara tried to rest. She failed. Every time her body tightened, her hand went to her belly and her eyes went distant, as if listening inward for a language only fear and motherhood understood. "I don't want to be turned into a case file," she said once. Iris sat beside her. "Then we keep you a person in every record we make." At dusk, Ronan's phone buzzed. Mabel again. Her voice shook this time. "A black van just stopped outside the diner asking where you took her." Ronan's hand closed around the phone. "What did you say?" "I said if they wanted directions, they could ask the lake and drown politely." Despite everything, Ilara made a faint sound that might have become a laugh in another life. Then her own phone lit up. No ring, only a message. This one was longer than the first, cleaner, more confident. "A lawful maternal support team is being dispatched. Cooperation will protect your future. Resistance will be documented." Below that, one final line appeared. "We are coming to get you, this time legally." Ilara read it once. Then again. Her hand moved to her belly. Kyle stepped between her and the darkening window, his body tall and still, as if the room itself had asked him to stand guard. Ronan looked at Iris. Iris looked at Ronan. Outside, beyond the trees, somewhere past the blocked road and the frozen lake, the town had begun choosing what it wanted to believe. And inside the cabin, Ilara Quinn understood that the next knock at the door might arrive smiling. The knock came just after night settled over White Hollow Lake. It was not violent. That made it worse. 3 calm knocks touched Ronan Hale's front door while freezing rain whispered through the trees and the cabin stove breathed red light across the floor. Inside, No one moved for 1 full second. Ilara Quinn sat near the hearth with one hand under the swell of her belly, her face pale but awake with terrible understanding. Dr. Iris Calloway stood beside her, medical bag open on the table. Kyle had already risen before the third knock ended. The German shepherd did not bark. His yellow-black body became still as carved stone, ears forward, amber eyes fixed on the door. Ronan crossed the room without haste. His old olive-gray tactical shirt was wrinkled and worn at the cuffs, his combat pants darkened at the knees from the wet porch he had checked too many times. His clean-shaven face was calm, but his gray-blue eyes carried the cold focus of a man who had learned long ago that fear wasted time. He looked through the side window. A black van waited near the drive. Behind it sat a polished dark SUV, its headlights dimmed but still on, glowing through the rain like 2 patient eyes. On the porch stood 3 people. One was a woman in a dark medical coat, holding a professional bag against her chest. She looked about 45, tall and thin, with pale skin, short blonde hair tucked beneath a knit cap, and the nervous composure of someone who had been told she was doing the right thing but had not been told the whole truth. Beside her stood a broad man in a plain black jacket, thick-necked, heavy-faced, and expressionless. Behind them stood Adrian Voss. Ronan recognized him from the flyer before the man even stepped closer. Adrian was 42, tall, polished, and unnervingly controlled. His charcoal wool coat hung perfectly from his shoulders. A black turtleneck framed his long, clean-shaven face. His dark brown hair was combed neatly back, untouched by the wet wind. His eyes were gray and careful, the eyes of a man who had never raised his voice because other people had always done the dirty work for him. Ronan opened the inner door but kept the storm door locked. Adrian smiled. Not warmly, correctly. "Mr. Hale," he said. "I believe there has been some misunderstanding." Ronan said nothing. Adrian glanced past him toward the cabin interior. "Ilara, I know you're frightened, but this has gone far enough." Ilara flinched at his voice. "Not much. Enough." Cale stepped forward, placing himself between her chair and the door. Iris moved beside Ilara, her green-gray eyes sharp beneath the loose strands of light brown hair escaping her low tie. She looked at Adrian the way a doctor looked at a symptom that had finally admitted its name. "Who authorized this visit?" Iris asked. The blonde woman cleared her throat. "I'm Celia Marr, Maternal Support Coordinator with North Shore Family Response. We received a referral indicating prenatal distress, unsafe isolation, and refusal of care." Celia Marr's voice was trained to soothe, but the hand around her medical bag was too tight. She was not evil, Ronan decided, only useful. Sometimes useful people caused more damage than cruel ones because they arrived believing themselves clean. Iris stepped forward. "Ilara Quinn is under my care tonight. She has refused outside intervention. There is no transfer order. There is no consent." Adrian's expression softened with theatrical regret. "Ilara has been under extraordinary stress," he said. "She has become suspicious of people trying to help her. That is why we hope to handle this gently." Ilara pushed herself upright. Pain crossed her face, low and sharp. Iris reached for her, but Ilara shook her head once. "No," Ilara said. The word was quiet. Adrian tilted his head. "No? No more explaining me while I'm standing in the room." For the first time, Adrian's smile paused. Only a fraction, but Ronan saw it. Ilara stepped closer to the firelight. Her dark brown hair had loosened around her pale face. Her old blue-gray parka hung open over her cream-gray sweater. She looked exhausted, frightened, and very pregnant. She also looked awake. "You used my name on forms I never saw," she said. "You used my signature on deliveries I never confirmed. You let people whisper that I was confused before I even knew there was a story being built." Around me. Adrian's eyes moved briefly toward Celia. That tiny glance did more damage than denial. Celia noticed. So did Lucas Pike when his patrol vehicle pulled into the drive behind the SUV. The deputy stepped out into the freezing rain, one hand near his belt but not on his weapon. Lucas was 34, about 5'11", solidly built, with short brown hair plastered damp against his forehead and a square, honest face made harder by worry. His tan uniform shirt showed beneath a dark brown duty jacket, and his black boots crunched through the ice as he approached the porch. "Evening," Lucas said. No one answered. His eyes moved from Ronan to Alara, to Iris, to Adrian, to the black van. He looked like a man arriving late to a room where the truth had already begun bleeding through the walls. Adrian turned toward him smoothly. "Deputy Pike, good. Perhaps you can help restore some order." Lucas looked at him. "That depends who broke it." The broad man beside Celia shifted. Cale moved one paw, nothing more. The man stopped. Ronan opened the storm door and stepped onto the porch, but he did not block Alara from view. That mattered. This was not his story to speak over. He held up his phone. "Before anyone performs concern," Ronan said, "you should hear what concern sounds like when it thinks no one is listening." Adrian's face changed then. Not enough for most people. Enough for Ronan. From the small storage device found in the diner wall, Ronan had extracted an audio file that afternoon, while Iris documented Alara's condition and Lucas worked his way around the blocked road. It was short, imperfect, but clear. He pressed play. Static. Then a man's voice, Adrian's voice, calm, soft, stripped of public warmth. "She doesn't need to be destroyed. She needs to be categorized. Unstable is enough. Once that is accepted, every objection she makes confirms the assessment." Another voice asked something too faint to understand. Then Adrian again. "The child gives us leverage. People will tolerate almost anything if you call it protection." The recording ended. The porch stood silent beneath the rain. For a moment, even the trees seemed to listen. Celia Marr slowly lowered her medical bag. Alara's face crumpled, but she did not look away. Tears filled her eyes without falling. The shame was not hers, yet her body still tried to carry it. Cale turned back and pressed his shoulder lightly against her leg. Deputy Lucas Pike looked at Adrian, not uncertain now, angry. "Mr. Voss," Lucas said, "you need to step away from this residence." Adrian recovered beautifully. That was the terrifying part. "This is being misinterpreted," he said. "A fragment without context." "No," Alara said. The word cracked through him harder than shouting. She came one step forward despite Iris's warning hand. Her breath shook, one palm pressed low against her belly. "No more context from you, no more concern, no more records that turn fear into a diagnosis." Adrian's eyes cooled. For the first time, the kindness left his face completely. "You are making a mistake," he said. Cale stepped forward. Not with rage, not with teeth, only certainty. The German shepherd placed himself directly between Adrian and Alara, chest lifted, paws planted, scarred ear forward, amber eyes fixed on the man in the wool coat. Adrian stopped. One step, a small thing. But small things could become doors. Lucas saw it. Iris saw it. Celia saw it. Even the broad man saw it and looked away first. In that single pause, Adrian lost what he had come to keep, control of the room. Then Alara gasped. Her knees softened. Iris caught her before she fell. "Alara?" Iris said sharply. Alara clutched her arm. "Something's wrong." Another contraction struck hard enough to bend her forward. This one was different, deeper, commanding. Her face drained of color, and then warmth spread dark across the floorboards beneath her boots. For one frozen instant, nobody moved. Then Iris's voice cut through the night. "Her water broke. Lucas, call an ambulance now. Ronan, clear the space. Celia, if you are actually trained, wash your hands and help her get out." Celia stared at Alara. Then something human defeated whatever paperwork had brought her there. She dropped her bag on the porch and stepped inside. "I'm trained," she said, voice trembling. "Tell me what you need." Adrian began. "This proves exactly why—" Ronan turned toward him. "Don't." It was one word. It carried enough weight to silence the porch. The ambulance took too long. Winter always did. By the time it arrived, Ilara was on the cabin floor near the hearth, supported by Iris and Celia, wrapped in blankets, her face wet with sweat and tears. Ronan had moved furniture, boiled water, laid towels, and kept the path clear. Lucas stood at the door, refusing Adrian entry with the plain stubbornness of a man who had finally chosen his ground. Cale remained beside Ilara's shoulder. Not in the way. Never in the way. Only there. When pain took her breath, she looked at him. When fear tried to drag her backward into silence, the dog's steady breathing gave her something to follow. "Stay with me," Iris said. Ilara gave a broken laugh through pain. "I'm trying not to go anywhere." "You're doing better than most politicians under pressure." Even Celia laughed once, shakily. The sound was absurd. It helped. When the paramedics arrived, they were not gentle because life was soft. They were gentle because life was urgent. They loaded Ilara carefully, Iris climbing into the ambulance with her. Lucas followed in his patrol car, taking the evidence Ronan had copied and logged. Celia stayed behind long enough to give Lucas a statement that she had been sent under incomplete and misleading information. Adrian watched it all from beside his SUV, face composed again. But now his composure looked less like power, more like a mask held too tightly. Ronan climbed into his truck. Cale jumped into the passenger seat, wet fur steaming faintly in the heater's weak breath. They followed the ambulance down the frozen road toward White Hollow Hospital, lights flashing red against the ice. The baby was born before dawn, small, early, furious, alive. Ilara named her Leora Quinn. Light. Not the kind that split the sky. The kind that survived a long winter and still knew where to fall. In the hospital room, Ilara lay pale and exhausted against the pillows, her dark hair damp at her temples, her face hollowed by pain and transformed by something fiercer than relief. In her arms the newborn slept wrapped in a white blanket, tiny and red-faced, one fist resting near her cheek as if already prepared to argue with the world. Iris stood near the window, tired but smiling. Lucas came in quietly and removed his hat without thinking. The recording, the files, Celia's statement, the messages, Mabel's account, we have enough to stop him from walking in here and calling this family concern. Ilara closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. "Not enough to end it," she whispered. "No," Lucas said honestly, "but enough to stop him today." Ronan stood near the door. He did not know what to do with the warmth moving through his chest. It was not victory. Victory was too clean a word. It was something smaller and holier, like a match kept alive in cupped hands. Cale approached the bassinet only after Ilara nodded. The German shepherd lowered his head slowly until his nose hovered near the edge of the blanket. He did not touch the baby. He only breathed. Once, deep and steady. Leora stirred, then settled. Ilara watched the dog and began to cry silently, not from fear this time, but because something in the world had finally stood guard without trying to own her. Ronan looked away. Some moments were too sacred to stare at directly. Adrian Voss was not gone. North Vale Consortium had not vanished into smoke. Systems built on quiet cruelty did not fall in one night, but Adrian had lost the thing he valued most, the right to tell everyone what they were seeing. And Ronan Hale, who had once survived a war by obeying silence, had finally refused to let silence bury another life. Outside the hospital windows, morning rose over White Hollow Lake. The frozen surface caught the first pale light. No thunder came, no choir, no grand sign from heaven. Only a newborn breathing, a mother holding on, a tired man standing near the door, and a faithful dog beside the bassinet, keeping the world from slipping out of place. Sometimes grace did not arrive loudly. Sometimes it only stayed. Sometimes the miracles God sends into our lives do not arrive with thunder, fire, or a voice from the sky. Sometimes they come quietly. A dog refusing to look away. A tired man choosing to stop. A frightened woman finding enough courage to speak the truth while her whole body is trembling. Elara's story reminds us that evil does not always come shouting through the door. Sometimes it comes dressed in concern, polite words, clean paperwork, and the promise of protection. But truth, even when buried beneath fear, still has a way of rising. Ronan's story teaches us that a wounded heart can still become a shelter for someone else. A person who has lost much can still be used by God to protect someone who is close to losing everything. And Kyle reminds us that loyalty is one of God's gentlest gifts, a kind of love that does not need speeches to be faithful. In our daily lives, we may meet people who are carrying silent battles. Some are afraid to speak, some are being judged by stories others created about them. Some are one act of kindness away from believing that God has not forgotten them. So let this story remind us. Strength is not the absence of fear. Strength is choosing truth while fear is still standing beside you. Faith is not always knowing what will happen next. Sometimes faith is simply refusing to let darkness have the final word. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from, or share a moment when God brought light into a dark season of your life. And if you believe stories of faith, healing, loyalty, and courage still matter, please subscribe to the channel so more hearts can be encouraged. May God bless every person watching. May He protect your home, strengthen your spirit, heal the wounds you do not speak about, and bring peace into every place in your life that still feels cold, lonely, or afraid.